got a call from the speaker from Israel last night, and also the president called about the meeting the president's asked us to come to on May the 9th. I'll be there. I believe the speaker has announced he'll be there as well. But let's be perfectly clear about where we are. The House has passed a bill which raises the debt ceiling and outlines House Republican priorities. Many people thought that wouldn't happen. It has. The message to the president at this point is also pretty clear. You've got a choice between accepting the House bill or entering into a discussion which the speaker's been trying to have with the president for some time for an agreement between the two of them. In this situation, and I've been through a few of these debt ceiling dramas, there is no solution in the Senate. We have divided government. The American people gave the Republicans the House. The Democrats have the presidency. The president and the speaker need to reach an agreement to get us past this impasse. That's my message going down to the White House meeting. It'll be my message in the White House meeting, and I think that's clearly the way we get to a solution.
Well, that is the leader, I think, made the point very, very well. There is no deal that gets done that can't pass the House of Representatives and be signed into law by the President. This is a conversation that needs to happen. It's been 90 days since President Biden has made any effort to reach out to Speaker McCarthy. Speaker McCarthy's been available, continues to be available, and now has a product or a result to act on. And the President's position, the Democrats' position of not negotiating is not sustainable. And the other thing that's not sustainable is our national debt. If you look at what's happened just in the last decade or so, in 2010, interest on the debt was just a little bit under $200 billion a year. In 2022, it's $475 billion a year, a 142% increase. And the Committee for Responsible Budget tells us that out of every dollar of the debt for the next 10 years, 50 cents out of every dollar of the debt will be used for nothing more than to pay interest on the debt. This has got to be dealt with. Senator Schumer has said that, he wants to put there's votes for a clean debt limit. I don't know where he's getting his information, because there aren't the votes for a clean debt limit. What we do know is that in 7 of the last 10 negotiations on the debt limit, there have been budgetary reforms. So 70% of the time the debt limit gets lifted, there has been a discussion, conversation around, and a negotiation about budgetary and policy reforms. That's what needs to happen this time. And that's supported by the American people. Polls show that 65% of the American people believe that you shouldn't raise the debt limit without doing something about the debt. And so that's where the American people are, and clearly that's where we are. And I just hope that in the next few days, hopefully by the time when this meeting happens on May 9th, we can see serious and real progress, or else the administration will be the first administration ever to have to deal with a default on the debt, because a clean debt limit is not going to happen. And I think they need to understand that, get serious about sitting down at the table. And if the X date actually is June 1, that brings an additional sense of urgency to this situation. We need to get there, and hopefully the administration will finally pick up the ball and start going to work in addressing this important issue.
Joe Biden is playing Russian roulette, as well as the Democrats, with our Americans' economy. It's dangerous, it's reckless. The President and the Democrats are fear-mongering, threatening to default on the debt. They believe it's okay to continue to borrow and spend money we don't have, and the American people deserve better. This spending binge that the Democrats have been on the last 2 years has brought us record high inflation, 40-year high inflation, and a debt of over $31 trillion. As a result, 2/3 of Americans say if you're going to raise the debt ceiling, you need to tie it to some reforms in spending. That's what American families have to do if, for one reason or another, they max out their credit cards. And the Republicans in the House of Representatives have done just that in terms of coming forward with reforms that are responsible, that address the issue. And you take a look at what they've included in there, things like clawing back unused COVID money. Of course, that's very popular with the American people. Tying work for able-bodied American adults who don't have children, tying that to welfare. Again, the American public agrees. So it's time for President Biden to take his head out of the sand and sit down and talk and negotiate with Speaker McCarthy. Maybe the president believes that there's no cutting to be done. There's no waste, fraud, or abuse in government. Well, there's clearly areas where we can do reforms. They're needed, to the point that the 8 times that reforms have been done tied to a raising of the debt ceiling, well, Joe Biden was either in Congress or as the Vice President of the United States. He's been for 6 of the 8. So it is time for Joe Biden to end this debt ceiling madness.
It is very much time for Joe Biden to come to the table and negotiate with Kevin McCarthy. It is the right thing to do. This administration is wreaking havoc with America. It's impacting our farmers, our ranchers, and our small businesses. And speaking of small businesses, happy National Small Business Week. As the ranking member of the Senate Small Business Committee, I am committed to working for our small businesses and easing up on federal regulation that impacts our small businesses, that overburdensome worries that our small businesses have in trying to get out the reports they need to meet their obligations to the federal government. We've seen everything from WOTUS to Biden's electric vehicle rule to even stripping away the Democratic caucuses from Iowa. Overall, what we're seeing with the Democrats is they're giving middle America the middle finger, and it has got to stop. We need to see our small businesses thriving, and to do that, we're going to push back on overburdensome regulation. I have a bill that would force federal agencies to prove that their new rules don't have an overburdensome pressure or obligation to small businesses, and we're going to make them prove it. So we're reintroducing that bill. We hope that the Senate Democrats will take it up and actually have a healthy discussion on what it is to support small businesses. So again, happy National Small Business Week.
Well, thank you all for being here, and Joni and I did not coordinate our outfits, although it looks like we did. You know, it's about time that the president did come to the table to begin negotiations with Speaker McCarthy. I want to congratulate him and the House for their efforts. They didn't drag it out to the last day. They got it done on a Wednesday. Great for them, great for you all as well. And I think they created a package that really said where and how they believe, in order to raise the debt limit, what kind of conditions should be on it. So I think what I'd like to do today is sort of go back to some of the comments. Senator Schumer said in November 2022, we'd like to get the debt ceiling done in this lame duck session, and it should be done in a bipartisan way. We agree with that. But then in February of this year, he says, we believe the House cannot pass a debt ceiling the way they're talking about. That's what we're saying. Show us your plan, because I don't think you can get one together. Well, proven wrong there. As we know, the president is going to have the leaders down next week. The House passed that bill. And I think it would be useful for us to go back to when President Biden was candidate Biden, when he asked the American people to send him here to be that president that was not going to be in the place we're in right now. So he says, I'm running to offer our country, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, a different path Some of the same people are saying Biden doesn't just get it. You can't work with Republicans anymore. Well, folks, I'm going to say something outrageous. I know how to make government work. I know how to deal with the big issues. I try to recognize the limits of where they can go and try to find principled compromise. Compromise is not a dirty word. It's how our government was designed to work. I found that my whole life, and I will do that as president. These are all the statements that he made as he was trying to convince the American people that he would be the best president for us. And yet, when he had his chance, when he sat down with Speaker McCarthy over 80 days ago, he was stuck in the mud. His spokesperson said on at least 5 occasions, we will not negotiate, in very much in an opposite direction of what he told the American people the kind of president that he would be. So I'm glad he's come to the table. There is a way to find a solution, but it can't be one way and the other side has no way to do it. It won't pass the House, as Senator Thune said. It wouldn't pass the Senate either. And so I think it's time for the president to lead and negotiate with Speaker McCarthy.
One thing we've seen over the course of the last several months in this debt ceiling discussion is when it comes to our colleagues, the Democrats, and spending, the sky is their limit. It's unfortunate the Democrats want to jam a debt ceiling hike with no spending reform through a divided Congress. The polls are very clear. Supermajorities of the American people want to see restraints placed on future spending in exchange for lifting the debt ceiling. And I think President Biden and the White House were shocked. They were shocked by what happened last week in the House. They didn't think Speaker McCarthy and the Republicans could pass a debt ceiling bill, but they did. They passed a debt ceiling bill that had responsible reforms tied to it, dealing with the root cause of the problem, which is spending. It's unfortunate it took the president now 90 days before reaching out to Speaker McCarthy to come to the table, but they're still saying the debt ceiling is non-negotiable. In fact, a White House official who refused to be named was quoted in Politico, in this article here, calling spending reform a ransom. Can you imagine going on the streets of America and talking to the average person who's seeing $31 trillion of debt and to tell them the White House officials are saying that having a spending reform discussion in exchange for lifting the debt ceiling is taking ransom? Biden and Senate Democrats need to get with the program and acknowledge something that Montanans already know. The spending is the problem. We shouldn't raise the debt ceiling without reining in, having some reforms in spending, reducing waste, lowering costs. That's a winning argument for the American people. To Senate Democrats, I say this. Saying that the president should not even sit down with Speaker McCarthy is not a sustainable position for the fiscal health of this country. Mr. President, it's time to get serious about responsible spending reform and to bring some fiscal sanity back to Washington, D.C.
Leader McConnell. Leader McConnell.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. What exactly are you for? Are you for the House Republican bill?
I'm for the Speaker, as I've said repeatedly, reaching an agreement with the President to deal with the debt ceiling. I think what the House has passed makes a lot of sense. To the extent that the President is not in favor of the House bill, and he obviously is not, he and the Speaker need to reach an agreement so we can get a solution. Look, let me remind you all again, divided government's not unusual in this country. We've had divided government more often than not since World War II. When the American people don't give all the power to one side, they're saying you guys need to figure out how to deal with the bigger problems by negotiating. This will ultimately, in my view, be solved when the Speaker and the President reach an agreement.
Leader McConnell, there's a real prospect that they are unable to reach an agreement. You have, in the past, these past standoffs, proposed inventive ways out of it. Are you ruling out getting involved at all if there's no?
Well, what I'm
agreement
saying
deal?
is the conditions for reaching an agreement change depending upon the nature of the bodies. Many people point back to 10 years ago when President Biden and I were involved in reaching an agreement. That was a different set of players than we have today. If you look at the House, what they accomplished was a surprise to everyone, given the various factions. They're having achieved an outcome. It should be clear to the administration that the Senate is not a relevant player this time. They have got to have a measure that can pass the House. How does it pass the House? It has to have the support of the Speaker, and I'm behind the Speaker.
Leader McConnell. It seems as though you're asking for negotiation here, but there have already been several House Republicans that have said that this is their compromise, that they're not moving anywhere past this particular bill. Do you believe that if there is some sort of compromise that comes out of your meeting next week, that the Speaker agrees to, that he can get the votes in the House to get it over?
At the risk of wearing you out with redundancy, what I am convinced of is that the ultimate solution will be between the Republican House and the President. And the sooner the President and the Speaker get about it, the better the country will be off.
Leader McConnell.